So, the title of tonight's talk is Poetry, Patience, and Refuge. And my intention was to offer some possibilities, some reminders for finding refuge, for taking care of this relative self, and by extension, all beings in the world. So, as always, when you listen to a talk, pay attention to the sounds externally, but also the ones internally. What's arising in you as you listen, and trust your intuition. Be curious and contemplate what's useful, and let the rest drift by. So, what follows has to do with all of it, the full catastrophe, the spring, COVID-19, patience, refuge. And so I thought I'd begin with just a snippet of something that's happening in some places this spring, and that is the birthing of calves. Some of you know that I grew up on a farm over in the Shenandoah Valley, and my brother has cattle on that little farm now, and some of them are calving, and some for the first time. And Wendell Berry, who is a Kentucky farmer and a poet, wrote a poem about the cows, a cow's first calf. And you might just see what arises as you listen to this. Her fate seizes her and brings her down. She is heavy with it. It wrings her. The great weight is heaved out of her. It eases. She moves into what she has become, sure in her fate now as a fish free in the current. She turns to the calf who has broken out of the womb's water and its veil. He breathes. She licks his wet hair. He gathers his legs under him and rises. He stands and his legs wobble. After the months of his pursuit of her now, they meet face to face. From the beginnings of the world, his arrival and her welcome have been prepared. They have always known each other. So circumstances keep shifting. Upheavals occur. Biological organisms, us included, keep responding to sensations. The unpleasant ones, of course, we're recoiling from. We numb, we wince, or we pull back. And the ones we like, we proceed, we move towards, we venture forth. And so just reflecting on how COVID-19 has really unleashed a cascade of reordering at all levels, and how we are grappling with the small and the mammoth changes at the personal level, the communal level, and the global level. And it's perhaps no surprise that we are experiencing heightened states of confusion and anxiety, anger, inspiration, sadness, humor, grief, creativity. It's all here. At times, if we have the luxury of resources and space and energy, we are retreating, we're sheltering in place, and we're simplifying our lives to some degree. And perhaps seeing the spring as a kind of balm amid the chaos, because it reminds us both of the ordinary and the miraculous. Some have said that this is a time of great awakening, that there can be a seismic shift in our perspective, an opportunity for a personal and a global reset. For ourselves, we are in the process of creating perhaps new habits by default or with intention, in the ways that we're caring for this body, this heart, this mind, and for the community in the protection and the livelihoods of neighbors, and for the world in the issues of resource allocation and social justice. Rumi has a poem that speaks to some of this tumultuous change that we're undergoing. He's called it Bird Wings. Your grief for what you've lost lifts a mirror up to where you are bravely working. Expecting the worst, you look, and instead, here's the joyful face you've been wanting to see. Your hand opens and closes, and opens and closes. If it were always a fist, or always stretched open, you would be paralyzed. Your deepest presence is in every small contracting and expanding, the two as beautifully balanced and coordinated as bird wings. Our practice is an art form, really. It's crafted from presence according to intention and awareness of what's wise, what's wholesome, even when we stray from that. And over the past couple of months at the daily noontime sits and on Tuesday evenings, we've been practicing with the help of leaders compassion as a refuge. So we've learned about some calming and soothing strategies, about how to pay particular attention to the mindfulness of the body, the foundation for this practice. We learned something about attention awareness and about how to work with difficult emotions on multiple levels. Another way that we might view compassion is through the lens of patience. Patience is one of the paramitas, the paramis, which is a Pali word meaning perfection or transcendent. And the paramitas are really ways in which we just bring the path of awakening, this practice, into everyday life. So the one I want to talk a little bit more about tonight, that of patience, includes also these elements: tolerance, forbearance, acceptance, and endurance. So patience, we might say, has the characteristic of acceptance, that there's some element of allowing. Its function is to endure the desirable and the undesirable. And the manifestation of patience is tolerance or non-opposition. And this doesn't mean we don't take a stand, we don't have an opinion, we don't act in some way. But it means more that we are willing to know things the way they are, moment to moment. We're willing to know the pain or the confusion or the anxiety or the despair that arises. Then it means choosing to not respond reactively so that other possibilities can arise. Sometimes when we notice blind desire arising, when we want something that the universe can't deliver or provide, we might ask the question, what if we let loose of the person who's efforting, the one who longs for awareness? So we're not taking away awareness, we're letting that stand, but we're bringing an element of patience to the moment. And there are multiple ways we might do this. One is just to breathe. Remember to breathe, to pause, to soften, to open. And rather than drilling in or drilling down or honing in, we're actually perhaps even pulling back a bit and opening to see what's what's there and what else is there. We know that the mind is like a thin layer of clouds always present with thoughts, memories, and feeling states. And all of these are mental formations. So it's not as though we're trying to change the mind or make it do this or make it do that, because sometimes in our efforting, are trying to nudge it or push it this way or that, what we're really doing is creating a lot of resistance. We want things to be other than the way they are, but the more we avoid or push, the more we guarantee the presence of that we don't want. I can't decide that I won't ever be angry, but if I could bring a degree of patience, a sort of caring attention, if I could see the anger, if I allow myself to see the anger and surrender, relax the body, observe what's here and allow a flow, then the field of attention can widen. And there is an element here of surrendering, of not fighting, which is really an act of dropping judgment and being compassionate. This poem is by May Sarton, and she is speaking of a bird, the phoebe. The phoebe sits on her nest hour after hour, day after day, waiting for life to burst out from under her warmth. Can I weave a nest for silence? Weave it out of listening, listening, layer upon layer? But one first must become small, nothing but a presence, attentive as a nesting bird, proffering no slightest wish, no tendril of a wish toward anything that might happen or be given. Only the warm, faithful waiting contained in one's smallness, beyond the question, the silence, before the answer, the silence. So sometimes when we only believe in our own powers, we miss the healing power of the universe. The patience of perseverance keeps us from succumbing to doubt or discouragement or fear. It can enable us to stay steady with the practice, no matter the weather or the news cycle or the feeling states arising. It also means, this practice of patience, that we can notice what happens when there is anger, or if we're insulted or we feel hurt, rather than succumbing to anger or aggression or despair when there's a sense of being threatened. We might instead notice our reactivity and pause and see what else is there, what else is present. Maybe you've had that happen to you, where a situation has occurred where you have felt a degree of anger with a person or a situation. And you might notice what happens when you stop, rather than blurting out or acting immediately, just to pause. There's an allowing, a kind of enabling something else to arise. And sometimes it's an insight about what's truly going on, or sometimes it's another perspective of what's going on. So patience has this capacity to be an acceptance of truth, of a larger truth, including the insight that at our core, there is no self that we need to build up, hang on to, or defend. It's often why the anger has arisen in the first place, that there is a sense of needing to defend the self or take care of ourselves. So patience comes from the absence of our habitual automatic triggers and our reactive hooks to the challenges of life. Here's a story about the Buddha, and he reflects on patience. Once an angry man insulted the Buddha. The Buddha simply asked the man if people ever visited him in his home. The man, who was surprised by the change of this topic, answered, "Well, yes." The Buddha then asked, "Well, do your visitors ever bring gifts?" And when the man replied yes again, the Buddha asked, "Well, what would happen if he refused to accept the gifts? Who would the gifts belong to then?" The man said that, of course, well, they'd still belong to those who brought them. The Buddha then calmly said, in the same way, "Since I do not accept your insults, they remain with you." So sometimes it's helpful to ask um, of ourselves, embracing all of parts of ourselves, the icky, the murderous, the grieving, the raging, the muddled, confusion, along with the patient, generous, courageous, diligent, kind. We just see it's all here, have patience with it, and see if instead we can bring some curiosity to this being, because that's when awareness can happen. There was an 11th century Tibetan Buddhist teacher from India named Atisha, and he left some words of advice for those of us walking on the planet. He says, when you're in the company of others, guard your speech. Whenever you are alone, guard your mind. And it seems to me that patience would be something to cultivate, a perfection to cultivate, to guard our speech, to guard our minds. He goes on to say, be of good will and without prejudice. Always generate the compassionate mind. Consider all phenomena to be dreams. Be grateful to everyone. Don't be swayed by outer circumstances. Don't brood over the faults of others. Explore the nature of unborn awareness. At all times, simply rely on a joyful mind and don't expect a standing ovation. We could take each of these maybe over the span of a couple of weeks and use each as a mantra for perhaps an intention for the day. So, one more poem for tonight. 2 nights from tonight, there will be a full moon. It's called the flower moon. It was given that name by the Algonquin Indians in this country. Elsewhere, it's also in the middle of the holy month of Ramadan. And it's also the Buddha's birthday moon, this full moon in May. And I looked on the NASA website this afternoon and just did a little research about this particular full moon. It's a super moon. And I'll let you go to that website and figure out what that is. But this is what's interesting, was interesting to me. The website ended the description of the full moon by saying, as usual, the wearing of suitably celebratory celestial attire is encouraged in honor of the full moon. So, whatever that means to you, 2 nights from tonight, if it's a clear night as it was last night, you might go out, stand under the moon. And here's something you might reflect upon. These words are from Billy Collins. The moon is full tonight. It's as full as it was in that poem by Coleridge where he carries his year-old son into the orchard behind the cottage and turns the baby's face to the sky to see for the first time the earth's bright companion. Something amazing to make his crying seem small. And if you wanted to follow this example, tonight would be the night to carry some tiny creature outside and introduce him to the moon. And if your house has no child, you can always gather into your arms the sleeping infant of yourself, as I have done tonight, and carry him, her outdoors, all limp in a tattered blanket, making sure to steady the lolling head with the palm of your hand. And while the wind ruffles the trees in the corner of the orchard, and dark roses wave against a stone wall, you can turn him on your shoulder and walk in circles on the lawn, drunk with the light. You can lift him up into the sky, your eyes nearly as wide as his, as the moon climbs high into the night. So thank you for being here tonight, for your listening, and for your practice. And may you be well and safe.